You're representing 5 of Epstein's victims. What's your reaction to this extraordinary interview that Prince Andrew gave?
Well, he's been in the court of public opinion. Now it's time for him to take seriously the allegations against Mr. Epstein and others who are being investigated. And he should speak to the FBI. He should volunteer to do that. He doesn't need to wait and see if his attorneys think it's a good idea. He very well may have evidence or information that is relevant to possibly prosecuting others who conspired to help sex traffic underage girls. And I was very disturbed, Piers, that he said he wanted to tell in person Mr. Epstein that he couldn't have contact with him anymore because he had engaged in conduct that was unbecoming. Unbecoming? Mr. Epstein had been convicted of sex crimes involving children. Why don't we just call it what it was? Child molestation, child abuse. And I think that the prince should start calling it what it was as well.
And Gloria, is there any way, from your information from the 5 women you represent, is there any way that someone like Prince Andrew could have been around Jeffrey Epstein's world in various locations around the world without being aware of his predilection for all these young girls?
I don't see how he could have not known that there were underage girls, minors, because he did visit homes of Mr. Epstein in New York. So why didn't he ask the questions? Where are your parents? Are you in school? Why aren't you in school? Are you living here? Are you working here? What kind of job do you have? What do you do? Why are you here? I mean, I think if he didn't want to see them, I guess he could not see them. But I don't know how you could not know when there were so many of them there.
Gloria, Emily Maitlis' interview was pretty comprehensive. But as a lawyer representing some of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, what are the questions you would still like Prince Andrew to answer?
I would like to know anything and everything about Ms. Maxwell and what she was doing. Apparently, she was in, as far as I know, all of those locations, and perhaps others as well, obviously in London as well. And I would like to know who his employees were. In other words, who helped to recruit underage girls for Mr. Epstein to be sexually exploited? Who was in the chain? Who assisted? Who knowingly conspired with Mr. Epstein to sex traffic these children to Mr. Epstein? And I might add, many of them were very traumatized by what they suffered as a result of coming into contact with Mr. Epstein. And that harm continues today. So we're filing civil lawsuits. And in addition, the criminal investigation is a serious one and continues. And if there's sufficient evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, I have no doubt that criminal charges then will be filed against others who have conspired with Mr. Epstein.
And Gloria, finally, the accuser Virginia Roberts, as she was then, and she was 17 when she alleged that she had sex with Prince Andrew on 3 occasions. From what you have read and seen of her, do you find her to be a credible witness?
You know, I have no way of judging who's telling the truth and who's not. But all I can say is, you know, even if a victim sometimes makes mistakes about small details, it doesn't mean that something more significant hasn't happened. It doesn't mean that it has, but it doesn't mean that it hasn't. And I also would like Prince Andrew to really feel what these victims have suffered, because I feel in his interview that was broadcast on the BBC that, you know, he seemed to almost, except for Ms. Roberts, not even mention the victims and how much they were harmed. And there are so many of them. They haven't received the whole truth. They haven't received justice. And it's time for him to help in that process.
OK, Gloria, thank you very much indeed.
Dr. Hilary, one of the details that Prince Andrew gave in knocking down Virginia Roberts' claims of that night, March the 10th, she said she went to Tramp nightclub and danced with him and he was very sweaty. Now, he says that can't be true because he had at the time a medical condition where he'd been in the Falklands and he'd experienced so much adrenaline that it then went on to stop him being able to sweat normally. Now, this is quite a crucial thing in the evidence, isn't it? Because if someone remembers him as very sweaty, but he couldn't sweat, then they may be thinking of something else. Well, what is this medical condition?
Well, it's an extraordinary claim because there's only three things really that can cause this condition called anhidrosis or hypohidrosis. Firstly, it can be congenital, which it clearly isn't in this case. Secondly, it can be a prelude to something like heat stroke, where you're so empty of body fluid you can't sweat. Clearly, it isn't the case here. And there's a third explanation, which is that simply he had an injury or some kind of serious condition which would affect his whole body. And again, which clearly isn't the case. And as for the adrenaline thing in the Falklands, it doesn't make sense because sweating isn't mediated by adrenaline, it's mediated by acetylcholine. And there's...
Sounds like you're rather sceptical, Doctor.
Absolutely sceptical about this particular
But not
claim.
being able to sweat is a medical condition.
It's very, very rare indeed. I've never seen a case.
OK, Lady Colin Campbell, the problem is, for Andrew, is that when you watch the whole interview in its entirety, which I thought was a complete horror story for him in terms of PR, he lies about the little things repeatedly. He says, I never go out socially without a jacket and tie. A load of pictures immediately appear online of him coming out of nightclubs just in a shirt top, open neck. He says, I never sweat, at all. Loads of pictures of him looking sweaty coming out of nightclubs. He says, I don't hug people. A load of pictures of him appear immediately, him hugging women all over the place, right, in public. So on those three little things, which are not that consequential in the scheme of things, he's just brazenly lying. Why should we believe him on the bigger stuff?
Well, I beg to differ. I do not think he's lying. In the picture of him coming out of China White, if you look at the not uncropped picture, everybody else is shining like a Christmas tree. So obviously it's the flash that has created
Where's
that.
his jacket and tie?
I think what he was trying to say was that he doesn't usually. Obviously, he occasionally did. And, of course, most of the pictures that have been published are of him in the south of France. Nobody wears a jacket and tie in the south of France. Come on.
But surely it's more important.
Let me finish. And if you look at the pictures that have been taken in the south of France, the girls are, for instance, hanging out their tongues at him, jokingly.
He doesn't seem to be resisting very hard.
But surely if you have a doctor saying
Angela,
that...
let's come to you.
If you have a doctor who is incredibly doubtful that this could be a possibility that he wasn't sweating, that's the end of the story, isn't it? Doesn't matter whether he's got his jacket on or off, or if he's in a nightclub and sweating. If the doctor says that, who's got experience...
Well, I think if he wasn't sweating on the dance floor then, he probably is now.
Well, Angela, I'm awfully sorry, but an awful lot of doctors get an awful lot of things.
I think that's very rude.
Angela, I mean...
To say that?
To him, yes.
Angela, when you watched the interview, what was your conclusion?
I actually at one point got the newspaper and put it over my eyes because I was so appalled by it. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how inarticulate he was, how he said one thing and contradicted himself in the minute, how patronising he was, how he was full of praise for himself. I'm more than honourable.
I'm too
so
honourable. That's why I did it.
Honourable.
The trouble is, Lady Colin Campbell, it's not funny because at the heart of this is a serial
I'm not
paedophile.
laughing.
No, I know that. What I'm saying is, what really concerned me about this was you could argue before Jeffrey Epstein's conviction, you could say, as many people have over the years, I didn't know what this person was like, but you can't argue it after he's actually done prison time for paedophilia.
Sorry, you all seem to have forgotten that Jeffrey Epstein, the offence with which he was charged and for which he was imprisoned was soliciting prostitution from minors. That is not the same thing as paedophilia. Soliciting
what do you call it?
Prostitution.
If you solicit a 14-year-old for prostitution, you're a paedophile.
It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't.
It does matter.
And
You're
they were
procuring
not
an underage
14
girl for sex.
In America,
He wasn't.
I'm sorry.
He wasn't a decent man.
That is nonsense.
No, it's not.
He
He was
America.
convicted of procuring a 14-year-old girl for sex, for prostitution.
Was he? 14.
Yes, 14.
Well, but I'm not justifying Jeffrey
that's paedophilia.
Epstein. I'm not justifying No, paedophilia, I suspect. There's a difference between a minor and a child.
She was 14.
A minor
not-
is a child, Lady Colin Campbell.
No, a minor isn't
It's only
a
we're
child,
getting away from the
actually.
point.
Okay,
and actually,
legally, she was a child.
We're
all right?
we're
And he was
analysing-
convicted of it. So
we're
my point
analysing
is, but here's
unmissable-
my question for Angela. So once he knows this, Prince Andrew, this
Yes.
friend of his, he's
Yeah.
been gallivanting around with all these women everywhere and all these properties. Once he knows this guy was soliciting 14-year-old girls for sex
End
as
of.
prostitutes, right? Once he's done that, you then go back to New York to stay at his house for 4 days.
Yes.
Because
Dinner
you're
party,
to
walk in the
apparently say
park.
goodbye to this guy because
Yeah.
you're just too honourable. It's nonsense.
It's a complete nonsense. That's
It can't be
absolutely
true.
right.
Who goes to someone's house for 4 days to
Especially
tell
if
them,
it's
I don't
New
want to be
York.
your friend anymore?
Yeah.
Well, I seem to recall that you're sufficiently well-bred to know that civilised people do not dump other people except
Princess
in
Diana
person.
did.
Right, so you get-
Prince
I
Charles
said
does.
civilised.
But Lady Colin
They just
Campbell,
changed their
why
phone
couldn't
number.
he just have rung and said,
Because-
we've had a friendship, it
because
has to come
Prince
to an end?
Andrew is 60 years old. He's not 26. He does things in a different way. The correct procedure when I was young and still is, you dump people in person. You do not dump
why do you
stay
spend
with them
why do you
for 4
spend 4
days?
days partying with them as you dump them? It's nonsense.
He went.
He only dumped him when that meeting got into the press, by the way.
No, I think the whole thing was ill-advised. I certainly don't think he should have done it. I think he should have kept his distance. I think he shouldn't have given this interview. I think he's made many mistakes. The fact of the matter is, you cannot criticise somebody because they're just not as bright as you would like them to be.
Of course, Jeff,
Angela, my conclusion watching it was, I don't know for sure if Andrew's guilty of what he's alleged to have done with the
absolutely. None of
17-year-old
us
girl,
do
right?
yet.
But I'm not sure we're ever going to find out
Yes.
if he doesn't go under oath with the investigating
Yes, of
FBI and
course.
police.
Well,
I mean, if he wants to close this down, that is the only way to close this down.
Yes.
Go under oath, swear an oath,
Absolutely.
and then give your version of what you think happened.
But if you're very articulate, you shouldn't put yourself at risk by being interviewed by a really top analytical journalist because they're going to make mincemeat of you. But he wouldn't listen. In his sort of naive way, he thought that this was really a very good thing. There's just one thing I want to say about him. You know, he said he has no memory of Roberts, no memory whatsoever, no recollection, nothing at all like that. But then he said, but I didn't do it. So if you've got no memory, how can you not do it?
Angela, with due respect, he has been advised by lawyers he cannot call her the L word because she is suing Alan Dershowitz, who she accused of the same thing. Alan Dershowitz said, I've never met the woman. The woman is an L word beginning with four-letter word. She is suing Alan Dershowitz for having...
Yeah, but I think we've got to concentrate on the prince.
You're
not interested in him.
Well, it's actually not irrelevant because Alan Dershowitz is adamant.
him he can't answer things in
Alan
certain ways.
Dershowitz is a top lawyer in America. He's been accused as well. He vehemently denies it. That may well come to court, and then a judge may determine the veracity of what this woman says happened before with these men. So it's a valid point to raise that because it may be the only way that any court actually establishes whether she is a truthful person.
Yes. I was also appalled by the fact that not once did he say how much he regretted what had happened to the girls. He didn't have to put himself in the picture, but he should have said, you know, I'm the father of 2 marvellous daughters. I would have been absolutely devastated if it happened to mine. I really sympathise. It can ruin their lives. I'm so sorry about this.
Yes.
And then get on to the rubbish
Well, he seems to have
afterwards.
tried to... Well, people close to him seem to have tried to put that right in the Daily Mail today when we understand that he's told friends he regretted not expressing sympathy.
We're getting a lot of
for
reaction on
Epstein's
social
victims.
media. I'd say 99% very negative against
Very
Prince
negative.
Andrew.
He deserves
None of
it.
them understanding why he would give an interview like that, where, frankly, if you were kind of lukewarm about this and weren't that up to speed with it all, if you watch that at the end of it, you're thinking more that he's guilty than innocent. I don't see how you can think that any other way. I did.
Yes,
I was like, he sounds so shifty.
Yes. I think he's revealed himself in a way that nobody will forget and he will regret for the rest of his life.
Thank you all very much indeed.